Welcome to this video in which I'm going to be looking at making a clock with a photo frame included. This is going to be a number of videos, and this first one I'm just going to introduce the basic idea of the clock and then start to map out my new design. So this is one I've made earlier. I've got a class photo here, which I've covered the faces with masking tape, and over here here's the actual clock itself. Obviously, the clock face and the picture here basically are made from two sheets of acrylic here, clear acrylic, and they're held together using these bolts here, which have got Allen key heads, which have then been screwed into these little aluminium bars, and I've threaded those, so I'll be looking at an explanation of how I did that later. And then on the back here you can see that I've also got another bolt screwed into the back of this aluminium bar, which holds on this back piece. The back piece here is actually a piece of MDF with a thin veneer. The veneer in this case is maple. You can see on the edge here where the laser cutter has scorched the edge. So when we laser cut this, I had to make sure that I protected the front edge here so it was left nice and clean. Here's the clock mechanism with a battery and the ability to adjust the time. The spindle comes through to the front there, and the hands themselves are protected by this front acrylic sheet. To change the picture, you'd need to undo these four bolts here, take off the first of these acrylic sheets, and then change the photo before putting this top acrylic sheet back on and reattaching those four bolts. So that's the basic clock design I've come up with already. I'll look at how I did the graphics and the color and everything in future videos. What I want to do now is basically make a new one, and my new one is going to be themed around my dog. Here's my dog. Which this picture was taken in the summer holidays there on vacation, as you can see. There he is. I'm going to change from this maple veneered MDF. I'm going to put my dog Milu onto some cedar veneered MDF like this. This is an offcut here, so you can see there's some holes there from a previous laser cutting job. Now I just want to talk a little bit about sustainability for a second. The physical dimensions of this clock, or at least the height here of the clock, was defined by the size of these sheets of veneered MDF that we resource. And these have a height here. I can't quite show you because my webcam's too close here, but these have a height of 300 millimeters. And what I can show you here is that the height of this picture frame is 145 millimeters, so it's slightly below 150. Of course, 150 times 2 is 300, so I could just have cut these veneered sheets in half, but to make sure I got perfect alignment, I actually reduced it from 150 down to 145. Times 2, that's 290, and it gives me a tolerance there of 5 millimeters at the top and 5 millimeters at the bottom. And in terms of the length of this, that wasn't really a problem, because these veneered MDF sheets here are 600 millimeters in length. Now, if that's too much to take on board, don't worry, because in a second I'm going to go into 2D design and I'm going to map it all out there as an engineering drawing. But what I do want to highlight here, I'm just going to turn this sheet round. So what I'm going to do with this MDF sheet of veneered cedar is, rather than having the grain across, I'm going to have the grain coming straight down here, so you can see the grain. And my thinking is that if I put my dog Milu there, then actually I've got a space here for the clock. And of course, having this in portrait means it's narrow, but it needs more depth to the clock. So that's why I'm going to go into this new orientation, and this is 300 millimeters in width here, so I'm thinking that basically I can I can put my clock in that space, and this means then that I could keep on using this sheet of material to then do further clocks further down the material, and that's more sustainable. I have much less waste. So I'm really thinking here about using these sheets of veneered MDF very, very carefully. So that's my thinking about the physical dimensions of my clocks. That's my justification. I'm going to go into 2D design now, and I'm just going to try and explain this a bit more clearly by using the grid settings here. So first of all, I'm just going to go to my grid settings by right-clicking on grid lock. I'm going to specify my grid spacing here to be 5mm as usual, lines and pale blue lines. So that's what I always do when I'm working with 2D design. I just find it much easier to work with and gives me much more resolution and control. And because I'm wanting to work with up to 600mm here to represent my full size of my veneered MDF sheet, I'm going to go to setup here, drawing layout, and let's see if I put that to A2. Well, actually that isn't quite even 600, but I'll just go slightly off the drawing area. I think that's going to be absolutely fine. So if I look at my origin here, this is 0, 0 in the bottom left hand corner. I can see that looking at the absolute grid references. And if I move all the way along to the bottom right corner here, I can see that in the X direction that is 595mm. Again, I'm looking here where my mouse is, and move my mouse to the bottom right corner, and I can see that's 595, and if I move a bit further actually off the drawing area, there's 600mm. So what I'm going to do here is get a rectangle. I'm going to work from the top left corner here, just bring it in 5mm from the edge, and I'm going to draw here a rectangle that represents the... Okay, I'm just going to escape this for a second. It's not working. Why isn't that bringing it back? Okay, for some reason the camera wouldn't come back there, but I'm trying to represent here the physical size of this MDF veneered sheet with the cedar finish. Okay, so I'm starting in this bottom, this top left corner, and now I want to look at the relative grid reference here, because this is the dimension of the shape I'm drawing, and I want to take this to 600 in the X and 300 in the Y. So that rectangle there physically represents the size of the full MDF sheet. Now what I'm now going to do is draw. Again, it's going to let me now. No, it's not. Okay, now I'm going to draw on here the actual size that I created for this clock. Again, here what I'm looking at is basically clarifying here how I've thought about sustainability of these designs and minimizing waste in material. So for this, I'm just going to come to my fill settings. I've still got the rectangle tool here, and I'm going to make this a hatched filled rectangle, and I'm going to draw out this hatched space. So this is the size I created for this this first clock here. Let's just double check. It was 145 in height, and it was 355 in width. So 145, so I'm looking here at my relative grid references, 145 by 355. So that actually is the size that I drew that initial clock to. And I'm just going to bring this again in 5mm from the edge and 5mm down, just to be clear here that this external rectangle represents my sheet of material, and I'm just making sure here that I get a clean edge when I laser cut, because I'm bringing it in from the edge. Now if I take this, I'm going to Control C and Control V. I've got grid lock turned on all the time. I'm going to bring this down to here. I'm going to go to fill. I'm going to change the fill angle there to 135. Will it let me there? Okay, 135. Okay, there it is. And just to be clear here, this would allow me then to have a second clock design cut out from this one sheet. So that was my thinking behind this clock. Now for my new clock with my dog Milu, I'm going to change the orientation of the MDF. So I'm just going to take these two, click and then shift select, and I'm just going to drag those off to the side. I want to delete them. I'll keep everything nice and clean and neat. This shape here, I'm going to rotate it. So to do that, let's see, I'm going to come to transform. let's just bring the drawing tools over to the side here, because when I hold the mouse pointer down to expand my transformation options, it goes to the left and it goes off my extended desktop. So let's come to rotate selected objects. I want to rotate this through 90. It's going to rotate it 90 anti-clockwise, which is very, very strange. So let's just click it there. So now you can see how that's rotated it up on this bottom left corner, as it was now bottom right. And it's important when you're rotating things to have a point of rotation, because now it means that when I pull this back in again, that it is still, let's go to media, it is still snapping to the grid. If yours isn't snapping to the grid, then make sure you rotate it on a clear corner reference point. Of course, instead I could also come back to my rectangle tool here and I could always just draw this again, but with 300 in the X and 600 as the Y or vertical dimension. Okay, so that again now is representing my piece of cedar, or cedar veneered MDF, and let's have a see. In terms of Milu then, this is where Milu is going to go. So I'm just going to work up my dimensions here. Now this picture is a standard 6x4 picture, or 15 centimeters by 10 centimeters. So this is 10 centimeters across, and when I printed this it did actually have a white margin top and bottom, so I'm probably going to trim that down a little bit, probably to about 140. Yeah, maybe 100. Well, we'll see. I'll go with 140 for the. I'll go with 140 for the time being. Let's just see how that turns out. So I've got this at 100 by 140. Back into here. So let's just draw from here 100 by 140. I've still got my hatched fill. I'm not going to worry about it for the time being. So 100 across and 140 in height. Again, I'm looking there at my relative grid reference in the bottom left corner. Notice they've both gone negative because I've gone from top right to bottom left. So the X has gone from right to left. That's X going reducing, and the Y has gone from top to bottom again, which is Y reducing. So they've gone negative. That represents the size that my picture is going to have. Now, I'm just going to come back to the camera here just to clarify a few of the things about my thinking. I've got these bolts going into these little threaded aluminium bars in the corner, and I need to make sure that I leave space for those. I want to bring my photo in from the side, and also I'm thinking about having a little bit more of a spacing here, perhaps a 10mm margin here at the top between the edge of the acrylic and the start of the photo, and then again at the bottom here from the edge of the photo and the edge of the acrylic. So let's have a see. If I bring this down, so it's 10mm down. Again, everything's with gridlock turned on. And if I think about where those bolts were, this was 10mm down and 10mm in. Now this is an M3 or 3mm diameter hole, or an M3 bolt. So I'm going to zoom in a bit more here so I've got more control. Let's come to the circle option. Let's come to draw a circle with a given center and radius. I'm going to put this to, I want 3mm diameter, so that's 1.5mm radius. And I'm going to draw here a circle. And those circles are going to be in those, hang on a second. I'll just do one for the time being. And interestingly, I've still got the fill as a hatched fill, so I need to make sure that's just as a standard no fill hole. Okay, so there's still a few things to think about here. That's that. That means that I need to bring my picture in a little bit more here. So this is why I like my 5mm grid. I can bring this in. So I've got a 10mm margin at the top. I've got a 15mm on the side here. If I just start to work this through here, yeah, okay. This is starting to get a little bit more complicated because I need to think about things in a little bit more detail here. So let's just come back to this design here. Okay, so I've got to make sure that my edge of my laser cut clock here is clean. So what I don't want to do is rely on this edge here of the cedar for my new clock. What I want to do again is bring this in 5mm and 5mm from the top. I can actually see here there's a bit of damage to the edge here of the cedar veneer and here at the top. So I want to bring everything 5mm in here, and in the same way I'll need to bring everything 5mm in from the edge here. So let's just now come back to 2D design. Let me see. So I'm actually going to bring this photo off this for a second. I'm going to bring this off for a second. And what I need to do here is be aware that this is the size of the cedar veneered MDF. And if I want to bring in my design by 5mm so I avoid the rough edge of the MDF, I need to have a tolerance here. So let's just lose this fill, because that's going to bother me. Let's now just draw this in here. Okay, so I'm just going to draw. I'm not worried about the height, I'm just looking at the width of this. So this is going to be my new design size. Let's now bring this in with my 10mm margin and my at the top and 15mm here. Let's bring in that hole here for my cutouts. That's where I want it to be. Yeah, let's duplicate this and let's pop it down here. So that's Control C, Control V. Let's bring this up. So again there, I've got my 10mm margin top and bottom. And then now let's just get some dimensions in here. Let's just see what we're looking at. I'm going to come to the dimension line tool here. I'm going to put a dimension in here. So this dimension is going to be 160. This dimension here is 140. And this dimension here, whoops, and look, I've missed that top right corner, so I'm going to press the escape key. Let's come back to the dimension lines. Let's drop it in there. That's going to be 100. So my photo is 100 by 140. The size of the clock is going to be 160 in height. Let's just find out what the overall dimension is here. This is going to be 290. Okay, interesting number. And I just want to see how much space I have here for an actual clock face. So again here, let's just come to my circle tool here. Let's just draw those M3 or 3mm diameter holes in here. And then let's just imagine now, my clock's probably going to be round, but I also want to imagine how big this clock face is going to be. So I'm just going to draw a square here. And if I look at this, it's going to be 140 by 140. That gives me basically the dimensions of my clock face. Now, I don't need to put this vertical dimension in because I can see I've already got the dimension highlighted there for the size of my picture. But what I will do is just highlight in here the size, the width of that. So that's 140 by 140 square. That means that if I come to my circle tool, come to a circle with a given center and radius, I want to give it a radius here of 70, which is half 140, which is the diameter. Let's just drop that in there like that. Okay. Now, the last thing I want to think about here in terms of just working through my design is am I happy with the layout of the width of this design across the design? Because I feel as if there's a bit of a gap here in the middle. Does that work? Because here I've got 15mm and here I've got 20mm. So my thinking is that what I can do is take all of this, I can bring it in. How far do I bring it in here? Do I bring it in 2? Do I bring it in like that? And then take this clock face and bring it in like that? Am I kind of happier? Whoops, I've gone too far there. 5mm out because I need to make sure that these M3 bolts are 10mm from the edge. Okay, I'm kind of just trying to visualize this. I feel as if it's too tight in the middle now. So now what I'm going to do is just pull this out 5mm. I'm going to pull all those out 5mm. And I feel as if now that's a nice proportion. I've got 15mm here, 15 here, 15 here, and it's going to fit on the end of this sheet of cedar. The whole thing is going to fit in here. So I think now what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this to the laser cutter as a card prototype and just see what it looks like. So in the next video I'll just quickly prep this up for prototyping, and then I'll laser cut it and then see how it fits onto that sheet of cedar veneered and MDF.